Roger David Casement, formerly known as Sir Roger Casement CMG, between 1911 and shortly before his execution for treason, when he was stripped of his knighthood and other honours, was a British diplomat of Irish extraction, humanitarian activist, Irish nationalist, and poet, described as the "father of 20th-century human rights investigations." He was honoured in 1905 for the Casement Report on the Congo and knighted in 1911 for his important investigations of human rights abuses in Peru. He then made efforts during World War I to gain German military aid for the 1916 Easter Rising that sought to gain Irish independence. In Africa as a young man, Casement first worked for commercial interests before joining the British Colonial Service. In 1891 he was appointed as a British consul, a profession he followed for more than 20 years. Influenced by the Boer War and his investigation into colonial atrocities against indigenous peoples, Casement grew to distrust imperialism. After retiring from consular service in 1913, he became more involved with Irish republicanism and other separatist movements. He sought to obtain German support and weapons for an armed rebellion in Ireland against British rule during World War I. He was arrested, convicted and executed for treason. Before the trial, the British government circulated excerpts said to be from his private journals, known as the Black Diaries, which detailed homosexual activities. Given prevailing views and existing laws on homosexuality, this material undermined support for clemency for Casement. Debates have continued about these diaries. A forensic study concluded in 2002 that Casement had written them, but interpretations differ as to the meaning in his life, early life and education. Roger Casement was born in Dublin to an Anglo-Irish family, living in very early childhood at Oyles Cottage, Lawson Terrace, Sandicoe. His father, Captain Roger Casement of the Regiment of Dragoons, was the son of a bankrupt Belfast shipping merchant, Hugh Casement, who later moved to Australia. Captain Casement had served in the 1842 Afghan campaign. He travelled to Europe to fight as a volunteer in the Hungarian Revolution of 1848, but arrived after the surrender at Vilagos. After the family moved to England, Roger's mother, Anne Jeffson, of a Dublin Anglican family, had him secretly baptised at the age of 3 as a Roman Catholic in Rhyl, Wales. According to an 1892 letter, Casement believed that his mother was descended from the Jeffson family of Mallow, County Cork. However, the Jeffson family's historian provides no evidence of this. The family lived in England in Worthing in genteel poverty. Roger's mother died when he was 9. They returned to Ireland to County Antrim to live near paternal relatives. When Casement was 13 years old, his father died, having ended his days in Ballymena dependent on the charity of relatives. After his father's death, Roger and his brother Tom were looked after by his father's people in Antrim, the Youngs of Galgorm Castle in Ballymena and the Casements of nearby Maghera and Temple House. He was educated at the diocesan school, Ballymena. He left school at 16 and went to England to work as a clerk with Elder Dempster, a Liverpool shipping company headed by Alfred Lewis Jones. The Congo and the Casement Report. Casement worked in the Congo for Henry Morton Stanley and the African International Association from 1884. This association became known as a front for King Leopold II of Belgium in his takeover of the Congo Free State. Casement worked on a survey to improve communication and recruited and supervised workmen in building a railroad to bypass the low 220 miles of the Congo River, which is made unnavigable by cataracts, in order to improve transportation and trade to the Upper Congo. During his commercial work, he learned African languages. In 1890, Casement met Joseph Conrad, who had come to the Congo Congo to use a merchant ship, Roi des Belges, to recover a European from a trading post on the upper reaches of the Congo River. Both had come inspired by the idea that European colonization would bring moral and social progress to the continent and free its inhabitants from slavery, paganism and other barbarities. Each would soon learn the gravity of his error. Conrad published his short novel, Hat of Darkness, in 1899. Casement would later take on a different kind of writing to expose the conditions he found in the Congo during his official investigation for the British government. In these formative years, he also met Herbert Ward, and they became long-time friends. Ward left Africa in 1889, and devoted his time to becoming an artist, but his experience thus strongly influenced his work. Casement joined the Colonial Service, under the authority of the Colonial Office, first serving overseas as a clerk in British West Africa, before in August 1901 transferring to the Foreign Office service as British consul in the eastern part of the French Congo. In 1903 the British government commissioned Casement, then its consul at Boma in the Congo Free State, to investigate the human rights situation in the colony of the Belgian king, Leopold II of the Belgians, setting up a private army known as the Force Publique. Leopold had squeezed revenue out of the people of the territory through a reign of terror in the harvesting and export of rubber and other resources. In trade, Belgium shipped guns, whips and other materials to the Congo, used chiefly to suppress the local people. Casement traveled for weeks in the upper Congo basin to interview people throughout the region, including workers, overseers, and mercenaries. He delivered a long, detailed eyewitness report to the Crown that exposed abuses, the enslavement, mutilation, and torture of natives on the rubber plantations, becoming known as the Casement Report of 1904. King Leopold had held the Congo Free State since 1885, when the Berlin Conference of European Powers and the United States effectively gave him free rein in the area. Leopold had exploited the territory's natural resources as a private entrepreneur, not as king of the Belgians, using violence and murder against men and the families. Leopold's private force publique had decimated many native villages in the course of forcing the men to gather rubber and abusing them to increase productivity. Casement's report provoked controversy, and some companies with a business interest in the Congo rejected its findings, as did Casement's former boss, Alfred Lewis Jones. In the longer term, Casement's report would prove instrumental in mobilizing the international pressure that forced Leopold in 1908 to relinquish his personal holdings in Africa. When the report was made public, opponents of Congolese conditions formed interest groups, such as the Congo Reform Association, founded by E.D. Morel with Casement's support, and demanded action to relieve the situation of the Congolese. Other European nations followed suit, as did the United States, and the British Parliament demanded a meeting of the 14 signatory powers to review the 1885 Berlin Agreement defining interests in Africa. The Belgian Parliament, pushed by socialist leader Emile van der Velde and other critics of the king's Congolese policy, forced Leopold to set up an independent commission of inquiry. In 1905, despite Leopold's efforts, he confirmed the essentials of Casement's report. On 15 November 1908, the Parliament of Belgium took over the Congo Free State from Leopold and organized its administration as the Belgian Congo. Peru, abuses against the Putumayo Indians. In 1906 the Foreign Office sent Casement to Brazil, first as consul in Santos, then transferred to Para, and lastly promoted to consul general in Rio de Janeiro. He was attached as a consular representative to a commission investigating rubber slavery by the Peruvian Amazon Company, which had been registered in Britain in 1908 and had a British board of directors and numerous stockholders. In September 1909, a journalist named Sidney Paternoster wrote in Truth, a British magazine, of abuses against pack workers and competing Colombians in the disputed region of the Peruvian Amazon. In addition, the British consul at Iquitos had said that Barbadians, considered British subjects as part of the empire, had been ill-treated while working for PAC, which gave the government a reason to intervene. Ordinarily, it could not investigate the internal affairs of another country. American civil engineer Walter Hardenberg had told Paternoster of witnessing a joint PAC and Peruvian military action against a Colombian rubber station, which they destroyed, stealing the rubber. He also saw Peruvian Indians whose backs were marked by severe whipping in a patent called the Mark of Aranya, and reported other abuses. PAC, with its operational headquarters in Iquitos, dominated the city and the region. The area was separated from the main population of Peru by the Andes, and it was 1,900 miles from the Amazon's mouth at Para. The British registered company was effectively controlled by the archetypal rubber baron Julio Cesar Aranya and his brother. Born in Lima, Aranya had wrested his way up from poverty to own and operate a company harvesting great quantities of rubber in the Peruvian Amazon, which was much in demand on the world market. The rubber boom had led to expansion in Iquitos as a trading center, as all the company rubber was shipped down the Amazon River from there to the Atlantic port. Numerous foreigners had flocked to the area seeking the fortunes in the rubber boom, or at least some piece of the business. The rough frontier city, both respectable businesses and the vice district, was highly dependent on the PAC. Casement traveled to the Putumayo district, where the rubber was harvested deep in the Amazon basin, and explored the treatment of the local Indians of Peru. The isolated area was outside the reach of the national government and near the border with Colombia, which periodically made incursions in competition for the rubber. For years, the Indians had been forced into unpaid labor by field staff of the PAC, who exerted absolute power over them and subjected them to near starvation, severe physical abuse, rape of women and girls by the managers and overseers, branding and casual murder. Casement found conditions as inhumane as those in the Congo. He interviewed both the Putumayo and men who had abused them, including 3 Barbadians who had also suffered from conditions of the company. When the report was publicized, there was public outrage in Britain over the abuses. Casement made 2 lengthy visits to the region, first in 1910 with a commission of investigators. Casement's report has been described as a brilliant piece of journalism, as he wove together first-person accounts by both victims and perpetrators of atrocities. Never before had distant colonial subjects been given such personal voices in an official document. Quote, after his report was made to the British government, the wealthy board members of the PAC were horrified by what they learned. Aranya and the Peruvian government promised to make changes. In 1911, the British government asked Casement to return to Iquitos and Putumayo to see if promised changes in treatment had occurred. In a report to the British Foreign Secretary, dated the 17th of March 1911, Casement detailed the rubber company's continued use of pillories to punish the Indians. Men, women, and children were confined in them for days, weeks, and often months. Whole families were imprisoned, fathers, mothers, and children, and many cases were reported of parents dying thus, either from starvation or from wounds caused by flogging, while their offspring were attached alongside of them to watch in misery themselves the dying agonies of the parents. After his return to Britain, Casement repeated his extra-consular campaigning work by organizing anti-slavery society and Catholic mission interventions in the region. Some of the company men exposed as killers in his 1910 report were charged by Peru, while most fled the region and were never captured. Some entrepreneurs had smuggled out cuttings from rubber plants and began cultivation in Southeast Asia in colonies of the British Empire. The scandal of the pack caused major losses in business to the company, and rubber demand began to be met by farmed rubber in other parts of the world. With the collapse of business for pack, most foreigners left Iquitos and it quickly returned to its former status as an isolated backwater. For a period, the Putumayo Indians were largely left alone. Aranya was never prosecuted as head of the company. He lived in London for years, then returned to Peru. Despite the scandal associated with Casement's report and international pressure on the Peruvian government to change conditions, Aranya later had a successful political career. He was elected a senator and died in Lima, Peru in 1952, aged 88. Casement wrote extensively for his private record in those 2 years. During this period he continued to write in his diaries, and the one for 1911 was described as being unusually discursive. He kept them in London along with the 1903 diary and other papers of the period, presumably so they could be consulted in his continuing work as Congo Casement, and as the savior of the Putumayo Indians. In 1911 Casement received a knighthood for his efforts on behalf of the Amazonian Indians. Having been appointed Companion of the Order of St. Michael and St. George in 1905 for his Congo work, he is honoured in the year of 2016 for all his work. Irish revolutionary, in Ireland on leave from Africa in 1904–1905. In 1904 Casement joined the Gaelic League. He met the leaders of the powerful Irish parliamentary party Lobby for his work in the Congo. He did not support those, like the IPP, proposing Home Rule, as he felt sure that the House of Lords would always veto their efforts as its peers had done many times before. He was more impressed by Arthur Griffith's new Sinn Féin party, which called for Irish independence through a non-violent series of strikes and boycotts, modelled on the policy of Ferenc Deák in Hungary, and he joined the party in 1905. Casement retired from the British Consular Service in the summer of 1913. In November that year he was one of those helping to form the Irish Volunteers. He and Owen McNeill, later the organization's chief of staff, co-read the Volunteers' Manifesto. In July 1914 Casement journeyed to the United States to promote and raise money for the Volunteers among the large and numerous Irish community there. Through his friendship with men such as Bulmer Hobson, a member both of the Volunteers and of the secret Irish Republican Brotherhood, Casement established connections with exiled Irish nationalists, particularly Clan na Gael. Elements of the suspicious clan did not trust him completely, as he was not a member of the IRB and held views they considered too moderate, although others such as John Quinn regarded him as extreme. Devoy, initially hostile to Casement for his part in conceding control of the Irish Volunteers to John Redmond, was won over in June, and another clan leader, Joseph McGarity, became and remained devoted to Casement. The Houth gun running in late July 1914, which Casement had helped to organize and finance, further enhanced his reputation. In August 1914, at the outbreak of World War I, Casement and John Devoy arranged a meeting in New York with the Western Hemisphere's top-ranking German diplomat, Count Bernstorff, to propose a mutually beneficial plan. If Germany would sell guns to the Irish Revolutionary and provide military leaders, the Irish would revolt against England, diverting troops and attention from the war on Germany. Bernstorff appeared sympathetic. Casement and Devoy sent an envoy, Clan na Gael President John Kenny, to present the plan personally. Kenny, unable to meet the German emperor, received a warm reception from Flotow, the German ambassador to Italy, and from Prince von Bülow. In October 1914, Casement sailed for Germany via Norway, traveling in disguise and seeing himself as an ambassador of the Irish nation. While the journey was his idea, Clan na Gael financed the expedition. During the stop in Christiania, his companion Adler Christensen was taken to the British legation. According to him, a reward was offered if Casement was knocked on the head. The British diplomat Mansfeld Findlay, in contrast, advised London that Christensen had approached them and implied that the relations were of an unnatural nature and that consequently he had great power over this man. This alleged episode provided London with the first intimation that Casement was homosexual. Findlay's handwritten letter of 1914 is kept in University College, Dublin, and is viewable online. This letter, written on official notepaper by Minister Findlay at the British legation in Oslo, offers to Christensen the sum of £5,000 plus immunity and free passage to the US in return for information leading to the capture of Roger Casement. In 2014 values the money offered as approximately £2,616,000 in income terms. The British version claims that Christensen solicited this money. However, Christensen travelled into Germany with Casement very shortly after, did not provide the information sought and did not receive the bribe, casting doubt on the accuracy of the British version of all events in Oslo. In November 1914, Casement negotiated a declaration by Germany which stated, "The imperial government formally declares that under no circumstances would Germany invade Ireland with a view to its conquest and the overthrow of any native institutions in that country. Should the fortune of this great war, that was not of Germany's seeking, ever bring in its course German troops to the shores of Ireland, they would land there not as an army of invaders to pillage and destroy, but as the forces of a government that is inspired by goodwill towards a country and people for whom Germany desires only national prosperity and national freedom." In Berlin, Casement negotiated with Arthur Zimmermann, then Under-Secretary of State in the Foreign Office, and with the Imperial Chancellor, Theobald von Bethmann-Hollweg. Casement spent most of his time in Germany seeking to recruit an Irish brigade from among more than 2,000 Irish prisoners of war taken in the early months of the war and held in the prison camp of Limburg and Erlangen. His plan was that they would be trained to fight against Britain in the cause of Irish independence. On the 27th of December 1914, Casement signed an agreement in Berlin to this effect with Arthur Zimmermann in the German Foreign Office. 52 of the 2,000 prisoners volunteered for the brigade. Contrary to German promises, they received no training in the use of machine guns, which at the time were relatively new and unfamiliar weapons. During World War I, Casement is also known to have been involved in the German-backed plan by Indians to win their freedom from the British Raj that is known in Britain as the Hindu-German conspiracy, recommending Joseph Magarity to Franz von Papen as an intermediary. The Indian nationalists may also have followed Casement's strategy in trying to recruit from among Indian prisoners of war to fight for Indian independence. Both efforts proved unsuccessful. In addition to finding it difficult to ally with the Germans while held as prisoners, potential recruits to Casement's brigade knew they would be liable to the death penalty as traitors if Britain won the war. In April 1916, Germany offered the Irish 20,000 Mosin-Nagant 1891 rifles, 10 machine guns and accompanying ammunition, but no German officers. It was a fraction of the quantity of the arms Casement had hoped for, with no military expertise on offer. Casement did not learn about the Easter Rising until after the plan was fully developed. The German weapons never landed in Ireland. The Royal Navy intercepted the ship transporting them, a German cargo vessel called Leopold, disguised as a Norwegian vessel, Aud Norge. All the crew were German sailors, but their clothes and effects, even the charts and books on the bridge, were Norwegian. John Devoy had misunderstood or disobeyed P.H. Pierce's instructions that the arms were under no circumstances to land before Easter Sunday, and so the Irish Transport and General Workers' Union men who were set to unload the arms under the command of citizen army officer and trade unionist William Partridge were not ready. The IRB men sent to meet the boat drove off a pier and drowned. The British had intercepted German communications coming from Washington and suspected that there was going to be an attempt to land arms at Ireland, even if the Royal Navy was not precisely aware of the location. The arms ship, under Captain Carl Spindler, was apprehended by HMS Bluebell on the late afternoon of Good Friday, about to be escorted into COBH, County Cork on the morning of Saturday the 22nd of April. Captain Spindler scuttled the ship by preset explosive charges. It lies at 40 meters depth. Its crew became prisoners of war.